So Ms. Legault, you'll let us know when we can begin.
It's still buffering, but I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
We're live.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting for June 10th, 2020 in this much irregular time. I guess these are special meetings or a regular board meeting. The first item on our agenda this evening is the approval of the agenda, but I do believe we have changes or additions. Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're deleting item UB1.
Thank you.
Just to note that the recommendations from corporate services that were pending have come forward and are available in PrimeGov.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda with those changes. Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? See none opposed. And I was remiss. I would like to recognize that we're on Coast Salish territory in various locations throughout several different nations, but I know that we're all thankful to be here. So resuming our agenda, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is M1, adoption of the regular board meeting minutes of May 27th, 2020.
If there's no errors or omissions, I'll ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by Director Sebring, seconded by Director Toporowski. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault, any public input this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are two items for public input period. The first is from Dave Hutchinson, co-editor, Shawnigan Focus Newspaper, Shawnigan Research Group member, and Shawnigan Residents Association member regarding agenda item CR 2.2, $5,000 grant and aid to the Shawnigan Residents Association for milfoil awareness. To the CVRD board, as evidenced by previous letters to the board and EASC, this grant and aid request is not without controversy. As a result, Director Acton desired further discussion and facilitated a Zoom meeting on June 8th, which included members of the Shawnigan Basin Society, the Shawnigan Research Group, and the Shawnigan Residents Association. From my perspective, several points were made that are worth mentioning. There was agreement that the SRA campaign does have value as an established vehicle for communicating with users of the lake about milfoil and potentially other water-related issues. There is uncertainty about actual results in terms of milfoil reduction. There is no measure of the removed material, and many fragments do escape to propagate in warm water. It was accepted that this is an aesthetic measure for those lakefront property owners who choose to employ divers or attempt to do it themselves. There was agreement to emphasize fragment reduction and to implement a method for quantifying the removed biomass. There are problems with the current requirements stipulated by the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations. They permit only the removal of invasive species from June 15th to September 15th. The removal of native milfoil is not permitted. There was virtually no milfoil of any type prior to 1970, and it is all objectionable. There needs to be more discussion about the native versus invasive species of plants and fish. It would be preferable to remove milfoil when the water is colder. The ministry focus on protecting natural fish habitat does not always make scientific sense given the many species of introduced fish. It was agreed that more dialogue is necessary with FLNRO, the CVRD, and credible professionals to come up with a comprehensive and well-managed milfoil control program for the entire lake. The Christina Lake program, funded by the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary, was cited as an example. The Residents Association agreed that following up with FLNRO would be an appropriate task for the Basin Society and qualified members of the research group. Milfoil, along with other issues like turbidity and spring algae blooms, are all related to increased nutrient contained in sediment-laden runoff flowing into the lake from soil dumping in the south watershed. The Basin Society is already involved with water quality testing, but will require appropriate funding to continue this work. Director Acton suggested that further grant and aid requests for specific projects. Restoring the necessary funds to Function 488 might be a simpler mechanism. This was a productive discussion between the community groups. Everyone involved wants to improve the situation and see public funding used in the best way. It is hoped that the SRA campaign might provide the impetus towards a more comprehensive and necessary milfoil control program. Thank you to the Director for organizing the meeting and those who participated, and that was signed Dave Hutchinson. The second item is from Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, on this evening's agenda is CR 2.2, $5,000 grant and aid to the Shawnigan Residents Association for Milfoil Awareness Campaign. The Director of Area B called a meeting to discuss the SRA 2020 plan to support the full marketing blitz and information material for lakefront owners on milfoil management. Members of the SRA, Shawnigan Basin Society, and Shawnigan Research Group attended. The marketing blitz is to educate waterfront owners on how to deal with milfoil management and other waterfront property care. During the meeting, it became quite clear that the SRA didn't want to take on the management of milfoil for the whole of Shawnigan Lake, which includes many road ends, parks, riparian areas, etc. When managing milfoil, the whole lake must be considered, otherwise it just keeps spreading. The SBS has studied milfoil and its management for many years. There are multiple systems to manage it, but few seem to really work. We have found a milfoil management system that really works at Christina Lake in the interior of BC. It is well documented and run by the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary. It might be worthwhile for the CVRD to look at a regional plan too, not only for Shawnigan Lake, but Quamachin and Somenos Lakes. Christina Lake plan includes the whole community and other organizations, including the area director, to make this successful. We could accomplish this at the CVRD too, but we must work together and support one another. This includes CVRD funding of the Shawnigan Basin Society. He's provided a link to some information on the internet regarding Christina Lake, and upon reviewing this information, you'll see that a function like this can't just be funded by grant and aid, it takes much more. In the meantime, we should support the SRI plan with a few minor amendments. And that was submitted by Cliff Evans, and that is all of the public input for this evening.
Great, thank you very much. And I appreciate Director Acton for doing that work and continuing that dialogue, because I think we know through all of the discussions over the last several weeks how awkward that is with Flinrow, etc. So moving on, we will go to, I believe, Ms. Legault, we have nothing until we get down to number 10, committee and commission reports. That is correct. So we have the report and recommendations from the Regional Services Committee, and for that I'll turn to Director Yanni Denardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like the report and recommendation of the Regional Services Committee meeting of May 27th, 2020 is that the Dididat First Nations request to change the work plan for their application under UBCM's Strategic Priorities Funds for the Dididat Power Reliability Improvement Plan 172071 SPF be supported. I move that.
Thank you. Moved by Director Yanni Denardo, seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed?
That is my report, Mr. Chair.
None opposed, the motion carries. Thank you, Director Yanni Denardo. So now we're moving from a very short one to, it looks like, a fairly long one. And for this, I'll turn to Director Morrison. This is the report and recommendations from the Electoral Area Services Committee of June 3rd. Sorry, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we pull out CR2, please? For discussion, further discussion?
You mean
number 2?
No, number 4 from CR2.
Pull 4, CR2, yes, please.
Okay, so number 4 from CR2. Thank you.
Are there any other additional ones people want pulled? I'll proceed. As stated from June the 3rd, item 1, recommendation that a grant in electoral area C in the amount of $1,000 be provided to CMS Food Bank Society to provide support for the purchase of fresh fruits and vegetables. 2, that a grant in electoral area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $5,000 be provided to Shawnigan Residents Association to support the full marketing blitz and information material for lakefront owners on milfoil management. 3, that the CVRD opt out of commenting on the application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for a change to the license for the Cowichan Golf and Country Club located at 4955 Trans-Canada Highway. Number 5, that the Water Management Division staff report dated May 6, 2020, loan authorization bylaw number 4328, Saltaire water system treatment upgrades be referred to staff for further review and discussion with the area director. 6, mutual aid agreement with neighboring jurisdictions to ensure wastewater and drinking water services are maintained during the COVID-19 state of emergency be approved. 7, that the application for APCs and Parks policy, the appreciation for APCs and Parks Commission's policy be amended to include audit standard requirements and by replacing 800 with $1,200. 2, that the budget for Function 250 electoral area services be amended by increasing the transfer from operating reserves by $3,600 and increasing director's expenses by $3,600. 8, that the Regional District of Nanaimo be advised that the Cowichan Valley Regional District supports the proposed bylaw amendments in the vicinity of the Nanaimo Airport with the following comments for consideration. 1, the term airport is not defined nor is reference made to definitions elsewhere such as the Aeronautics Act. It is suggested that the airport be defined to provide clarity around the uses specifically as it relates to Development Area A. 2, the lands currently occupied by the Cottonwood Golf Course are identified as future aviation in the Nanaimo Airport Commission Land Development Plan, which is not defined. Both the Nanaimo Airport Commission and the Regional District of Nanaimo support the continued operation of the Cottonwood Golf Course, and until future aviation is defined, it is suggested that the lands be zoned to their current use. 3, for the lands immediately adjacent to Cowichan Valley Regional District Area H agricultural lands, it is suggested that the required setbacks and landscape buffering be increased from 5 meters to those specified in the Agricultural Land Commission landscape buffer specifications. 4, the Cowichan Valley Regional District understands the use of a memorandum of agreement rather than development permit process. Recognizing the impacts on surrounding properties are normally publicly reviewed as part of the development permit process and allow for public comment from surrounding properties, it is suggested that, at a minimum, the Cowichan Valley Regional District be kept informed in the development of memorandum of agreement and be considered for participation in the development and the opportunity to become party to the agreement. And I move those items.
Seconded by Director Wilson. Discussion on these items. Director Wilson, and then Director Sebring. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spoke very briefly on number 1 at the electoral areas, but while we've got all the directors here again, I'd just like to reiterate that the reason behind this grant in aid is because this is recovered money from stuff that was not allowed to go ahead because of COVID, and it's just being reallocated to the CMS Food Bank. There's many people who have fallen through the cracks as far as being able to cope with everything that's going on. And that's the reason I'm reallocating this to the CMS Food Bank for the good work that they do. And I'm encouraging any other directors who have some funds like this available to perhaps think about supporting their local food banks as well, even though they already do, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Legault, we seem to have a call-in user whose microphone is doing. Can we find out who that is? And
So I believe that's a staff member, and I've just muted their microphone.
okay, thank you. All right, are we certain it's a staff member? It looks like the number is, but I'll take that as we're certain that's a staff member. Thank you, Director Wilson. I go to Director Sebring next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment more than a question, but on item 6 in this list, the mutual aid agreement with neighboring jurisdictions to ensure wastewater and drinking water services are maintained during COVID. I'm assuming that we've been doing this all the way along, and I'm just wondering why it's so late in the process that we're actually passing a formal motion on this. I mean, COVID's been with us essentially since March 17th. And here we are at the middle of June. So if staff could perhaps shed some light on that, because it's a bit jarring to see this at this late stage of COVID when we're starting to come out of it. And now all of a sudden we have a motion that says we're going to work together.
Through staff? Is there anybody on staff going to respond to the question?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take a stab at it. It just has taken some time to get it negotiated. That's all I can. That's all I can really respond to. I don't know if any of my other staff have a response. But.
Because it's my understanding that whether or not this thing was on paper or not, I recall very early in the piece that we were working with people as far afield as the Nanaimo Regional District and the Capital Regional District just to make sure that everything was in place. and,
Yep.
and that's been in place. This just formalizes it.
That's true, Mr. Chair. We've had those discussions right from the onset of COVID-19 in terms of backup for our operators. This was a more formal process, and it just took some time to work its way through the process. But it's formalizing that agreement that we already had in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't have anyone else on my speakers list on this grouping of motions. Do I have any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. This is on items 1 through 8 and all the subsections minus number 4, which we'll come back to. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Go to now number 4, Director Morrison, or would Director Acton, who wanted to like to do it first? Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since last week, I've had more time to think about this motion, and this motion was brought right at the last minute to committee, so we didn't actually have proper time to think about it. So I guess my question is, I have 2 questions. First one for staff is, this kind of letter has a tone of, well, we don't really want to follow the rules because you didn't give us a grant. Now, I am concerned that this is going to affect everyone in the organization who's applying for grants. It doesn't give us a good flavor, or it seems a little bit out of the ordinary to do something like this. So I'd like to hear from staff if we're actually hurting ourselves more than we're helping ourselves.
Through to staff. I have Director Smith on my speakers list. For staff, Mr. Crothers.
Yeah, I think we would have to be very careful in terms of how we word such a letter to the ministry and to Island Health. They are a regulatory agency, and I would just suggest that that maybe there be some consideration of maybe the board chair and myself working with the director to find some appropriate wording. But I think those comments are fair, and I would exercise some caution in how that letter is worded. I absolutely would, from my experience.
Thank you. So I would also comment, I'm not going to go into details, but I've been through the very same letter and the next steps that can come after a letter like that. And my recommendation based on reading this would be that the resolution be changed to reflect the director and the chair meet with staff to draft an appropriate letter that maybe doesn't include some of these specifics. But again, I'll go to you for follow-up, Director Acton, and then to Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And something that didn't come up at committee for Saltaire, I don't know if this is an option or not, but can they not hook up to Ladysmith water?
Oh, don't dig up that old skeleton. Of course, that was an early investigation, but I think there was some decisions along the way that Saltaire decided that it was in their best interest to go on their own. But that being said, the issue right now is about this letter, and I really want to keep it focused on this letter. But like I said, having experience with the almost identical scenario,
it might be good to know, because this is a $3 million job.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but I understand that process was completed, and the decision from the CBRD and Area G was not to pursue connecting with Ladysmith. That being said, what we're talking about in this instance is the letter. So I would graciously offer to work with Director Smith and staff to draft an appropriate letter. I do have some concerns about the specifics in this letter based on my experience, because the next step after this is not a fun situation to be in, and I've been through it. I don't want to comment on it publicly. We've resolved that with Island Health, and we've restored our good relationship, but I would be wary of sending a letter with some of the specifics I see in here. But I'll go to Director Smith, and then I would recommend that I am happy to work with Director Smith and staff to draft a letter that's acceptable to everyone. but maybe looks at some of the specifics here and maybe doesn't include those. But I'll go to Director Smith, and then we can go from there.
Thank you. The staff have, just for Director Acton's information, the CVRD staff did go through the scenarios in detail, and it was a decision that we were going on a standalone system based on the information that was provided by staff. The contravention order does indicate that if new evidence comes forward, that we can ask for a reconsideration. And I think that's, what the purpose of the letter is to ask for reconsideration based on COVID. We've had the Western Forest Products were on strike for 8 months. We've had Catalyst employees in our area who many of them haven't had any shifts or minimal shifts since February. So I think we're sitting at a very financially fragile time with all of these things that are impacting us. And we're just asking that letter be written for deferment. I'm looking forward to working with Chair Stone and CAO Crothers to draft a letter that will be acceptable for all parties involved so that we can move forward at this time. But we are looking to ask for a deferment on financial abilities. Without the grant, we will be definitely, and there seems to be a bit of a disconnect and inconsistencies and fairness that's been between some of the parties that are named in the letter, the Health Protection and Environmental Services, between the two, the Shawnigan Lake North water system and the Saltaire water system being administered out of two different offices. So I'll leave it there because I think it's still important that the letter move forward. And if it's not agreed that these are the parties that should be involved in the letter, I think it's fine to refer it back for the chair, Mr. Crothers, and myself to work together on a letter. Thank you.
So if I may, and I'll come to you, Director Morrison, next, I may suggest just something a little bit more generic. That would be something to the effect that a letter be sent to, I'm again concerned about I'll go to you, Director Morrison, maybe, and then I'll think this through a little bit. I'm just going to say that I've had experience with this, and this seems very similar to the way that we handled it incorrectly, and it led to further challenges for us in the interim. So I'll go to Director Morrison, and then I'll work on what I think might be capture the spirit and intent, but give us enough flexibility to write the appropriate letter in collaboration. But Director Morrison, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is exactly the direction that I was going. This was a crafted literally during the meeting resolution that gave a lot of the directors pause after the fact, and I would be more than willing to move that that this be referred to the chair, director, and Mr. Carruthers for a letter to be written to be determined by those three participants, and as simple as that. Give it as much broad leeway as you can have, and I think that should be appropriate and acceptable to our corporate officer. I'm trying to give you as much leeway as possible, so I would move that. Okay,
Ms. Legault, are you clear on what the motion is? Okay, can you just read it back for me just so I can have, because I was going to add a couple of things from this existing resolution, but I would just go to you just to give me clarity.
Is that me or Ms. Legault?
Ms. Legault.
It was to refer recommendation 4 to the chair, the area director, and the CAO to draft an appropriate letter.
Okay. Okay, so from your position as our legislative services person, is that going to capture the spirit and intent, or should we put something more in there around the seeking deferral of the water contravention order? Do you think it'd be better to leave it broad?
So the deferral is contained in the recommendation 4, so that is something I think they would take into consideration, but specifics are up to, yeah.
Thank you. So that refers the whole resolution to the process with Director Smith and the CAO and I. Okay, excellent. So thank you. That's been moved by Director Morrison. Do we have a seconder? Director Smith seconding? And do we have discussion on that? Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. And I'll work with you immediately to get this done, Director Smith and Mr. Carruthers. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. I'll go back to Director Morrison for the EA directors only. Mr. Director Morrison.
Item 9, Mr. Chair, is that CVRD bylaw number 4291, Electoral Area C, South Cowichan Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw for 3741 Holland Avenue, 2019, and CVRD bylaw 4292, Electoral Areas A and C, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment bylaw 3741 Holland Avenue, 2019 be forwarded to the board for consideration of second reading. Item 2, number 2, that a public hearing be scheduled for CVRD bylaw again 4291 and the community plan amendment bylaw 4292 for electoral areas A and C, South Cowichan for the same address 2019 with directors from electoral areas B, C, and F as delegates. And I move that item, or that item.
Okay, moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor, electoral area directors only. Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Thank you very much.
That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. And I believe now we move on to CR3, Ms. Legault, and that is the reports and recommendations of the Corporate Service Committee of just earlier this afternoon. Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The report and recommendations of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held June 10th, 2020. Following recommendations. 1, that the 2020 budget be amended to A, increase short-term borrowing for function 411 Kerry Park Recreational by $175,000. B, increase transfer from gas tax reserves for function 411 Kerry Park Recreational by $1 million. C, decrease federal conditional for function 411 Kerry Park Recreation by $1,308,337. D, decrease land improvements for function 411 Kerry Park Recreation by $133,337. Bear with me, I've lost it. My apologies.
No worries.
Technology is a great thing until it doesn't work.
We've had a technology kind of day, so no stress. Take your time.
I am reloading here, Mr. Chair. In the interim, I want to thank you all for the corporate services meeting this afternoon, which was very informative, to say the least. Let's try this again. I believe I'm on E, which is to increase transfer from capital reserves for function 464 Shawnigan Lake Community Center by $60,000. F, increase transfer from operating reserves for function 464 Shawnigan Lake Community Center by $60,000. G, decrease federal conditional for function 464 Shawnigan Lake Community Center by $301,779. H, decrease land improvements for function 464 Shawnigan Lake Community Center by $181,779. 2, that resolution 20-63.1.2 be rescinded. 3, that short-term borrowing up to $588,483 be approved for parking lot upgrades under function 411 Kerry Park Recreation Center to be paid back over 5 years as per the liabilities under Agreement Section 175 of the Community Charter. 2, that electoral area service budgets be reviewed by the Electoral Area Services Committee before being considered at a special Corporate Services Committee meeting, and that staff work with Electoral Area Service Committee Chair to coordinate these meetings. 3, that a special Corporate Service Committee workshop be held as soon as possible to discuss the budget process, priorities, and the approach to budget analysis. 4, that a target of 0% increase be set for the 2021 budget, and that a business case be provided for any increases above 0%. 5, that staff work with the Electoral Area Services Committee Chair to update the budget calendar to incorporate committee and commission meetings as appropriate. 6, 2 parts. 1, that the 2020 curbside collection billing due date be extended to October 16th, 2020. And 2, that the 10% discount period for the utility billing be extended to 90 days for July and August billings. And I will move those, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director McGonigal, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion on those? Don't want to have deja vu from earlier this afternoon? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That is passed unanimously. Thank you.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director McGonigal. And I believe then, Ms. Legault, we're moving on to staff reports SR1. Thank you. And the recommendation is that a 5-year rental agreement with Canada Post beginning June 1st, 2020 for space in the foyer of the Honeymoon Bay Community Hall be approved. I believe that's moved by Director Morrison and seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Sorry, I just have to follow Director McGonigal. He's raising the bar. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to SR2, staff report from the Development Services Division regarding application numbers DP 19I02 and DVP 20I02. PID, I'll skip, but it's for Lot 3 Perry Road. Recommendation is development variance permit application number DVP 20I02 with the PID to vary section 3.2 of CVRD Electoral Area I Yubo Mead Creek zoning bylaw number 2465 to reduce the setback from a watercourse for the construction of a single residential dwelling from 15 meters to 0 meters be issued, and number 2, that the development permit application 19I02 PID as noted be issued. It's moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion on this? Councillor Justice, or sorry, it says Councillor Justice. Director Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question about the way that this decision was made. I'm sorry, I'm not quite phrasing that right. I was just curious about whether the proposal to raise the weir and perhaps start holding back water, which I understand presents certain risks related to water level and inundation events, and the flood construction level of 167 meters and the 164 meter high water mark on Cowichan Lake. I guess there's some potential for those to change. And I was wondering whether the decision was accounted for the potential for those levels to change.
Thank you. Through to staff.
Through the chair, it's Frank Limshu, manager of Development Services. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Yeah, so to answer Councillor's question, the analysis and the report was predicated on the requirements that are in place today with respect to the flood construction level. Certainly, the site is challenging in the sense that when you look at the site plan that's attached to the development permit, you can see that the proposed building area is actually it's a substantial distance away from the natural boundary. However, in order to meet the flood construction level, the property's got to be, the variance is required to allow the building to be built in the most appropriate spot on this particular property. It's very difficult to predict what changes may be anticipated in the future. And so the decision and the recommendation is really predicated on the policies, standards that are in play today at this moment in time.
If I could briefly follow up, because I understand that there's some new RAR regulations, and the issue of undue hardship as a reason to get around the some of the old RAR regulations, I believe is now harder to get past. Can you speak to that?
Sure. At the time that the original RAR report was submitted, which was last year, it was submitted around the same time that the ministry had changed to the wrapper evaluation. And so this particular application has been evaluated, predicated on the current policies established by the ministry. So you'll notice that the actual date of the assessment is February 2020. So the application, it has been evaluated by the ministry based on today's standards, and not the standards that existed a year ago.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Limshu or anyone else? No comments. Thank you. Well, this has been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. What an agreeable group we are tonight. And we're moving on, I believe, to SR3. It's a staff report from Finance Division, request from Cowichan Historical Society, and the recommendation is that a letter of support be provided to the Cowichan Historical Society for the Duncan Train Station Rehabilitation Project. Director Yanni DiNardo, are you moving that? Seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? We're moving right along. I don't believe we have any public hearings or bylaws. We're going to the electoral area directors only bylaw portion of our meeting this evening. And the first item is BEA 1, and the recommendation is that CBRD bylaw number 4332, electoral area B, Shawnigan Lake zoning amendment bylaw 2020, be granted first and second reading. Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, this is for electoral area directors only. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Moving on to BEA 2, that CBRD bylaw number 4333, South Cowichan Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw 2020 be granted first and second reading. Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to BEA 3. That CBRD bylaw number 4334, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment bylaw 2020 be granted first and second reading. Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries again. So our unfinished business has been removed. I believe, Ms. Legault, that takes us down to question period. Any questions for the board this evening, or for me, I guess? Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not received any submissions for question period.
Thank you very much.
To adjourn.
Moved by Director Morrison. Do we have a seconder? Director McGonigal? Seeing no discussion on this motion to adjourn, thank you all for a long but productive day. All those in favor? Is there any opposed that want to hang out longer? I'm seeing absolutely none. Nice try. We are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. We'll talk very soon.
Thank you. Till next
Good
time.
night.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
guys.
John Boy.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.